Welcome to A Line Through Time, where I take the time to look through your favourite franchises and work out how it all lines up. Final Fantasy VII released in North America 20 years ago today, and people will not shut the fuck up about it. Even without the upcoming remake set for release around 2047, the level of reverence people have for this game is insane, arguably even more so than Ocarina of Time. Now I'm sure some of you are wondering, why are you only covering Final Fantasy VII here? Why not cover the entire franchise in one go? Maybe because I'm not in the mood to kill myself just yet? The franchise is ridiculously massive, so I'll be splitting it up and covering it by internal series. For those somehow unfamiliar with the franchise, Final Fantasy is a fucking juggernaut of the industry with approximately 1 billion titles released over the last 30 years. And while I could cover the series in December to coincide with the franchise's 30th anniversary, there's a certain other franchise taking up the December slot, so I'll be doing this now instead. So each numbered Final Fantasy is a self-contained story. While there are nods and references and certain traditions, each numbered entry is set in a new world with a new story, making it a very accessible series for newcomers. While Final Fantasy X was the first mainline entry to receive a direct sequel, it was VII that ultimately took the idea and ran with it, creating the compilation of Final Fantasy VII multimedia project. But none of that would have been possible if not for the runaway success of Final Fantasy VII, released in 1997 for the PlayStation, breaking away from the franchise's history of Nintendo exclusivity. It also broke away from the weird numbering convention where 1, 4 and 6 were released as 1, 2 and 3 in the West. There must have been a lot of confused kids in the West wondering why they were suddenly jumping to 7 after 3. But despite that confusion, the game really had an effect on people, perhaps because series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi had lost his mother a few years prior, leading to the themes of loss and coping with said loss being so prevalent in the story and so relatable for its players. Or maybe it was the sexy anime boys, I don't know. It was also the first game in the series released in Europe, you know, if you don't count Mystic Quest, which you shouldn't. But what actually happens in the game? Well, you have this brooding mercenary named Cloud with a big sword and a messed up memory working with a group of eco-terrorists to take down the big industry that is literally killing the planet. Then there's this legendary soldier turned supervillain with an Oedipus complex who's overcompensating to the extent a parody of Cloud would and wants to destroy the world with a massive space rock, and he shanks Cloud's girlfriend, which was a huge deal back then, and there's weird shit about clones and memory alteration and a ninja and maybe a vampire. It's anime. It is very, very anime. But people loved it. What people don't love, however, is the debate over whether Cloud's girlfriend is named Aeris or Aerith. I mean, what should I do here? If I pick the one people don't like, they'll get triggered and throw a fit, and I'll have to retire the channel because different opinions aren't allowed on the internet. What do I do? What do I do? In 2001, Squaresoft worked with Columbia Pictures to release Final Fantasy The Spirits Within, a big budget CGI movie that had nothing to do with the series and was such a colossal bomb it basically killed Square Pictures, led to Sakaguchi resigning from the company, and almost jeopardized Square's merger with Enix. But why is this relevant to FF7? Well, the far safer second Final Fantasy film was announced alongside the reveal of the compilation, Final Fantasy VII Advent Children, a direct sequel to 7 that saw a release on the 14th of September 2005. Produced by Visual Works, the company that had been making CGI intros to Square since FF7 itself, the film seems to exist as a counterpoint to Spirits Within. It's almost got too much to do with 7, bringing back the entire surviving cast as well as Sephiroth for the final fight. The film was so popular among fans that anime conventions were suddenly flooded with Final Fantasy VII cosplayers, and if you ever made an AMV, statistically speaking, you probably made one using Advent Children footage. And Linkin Park music. Plot-wise, it picks up 2 years after the game despite the post-apocalyptic implications of the game's stinger. Cloud is now an emo loser because the producers of the film figured that's how fans remembered him despite the character development he went through in the game, and even then he was never this bad. There's a weird disease going around that's infecting kids, and there's these 3 guys who are like Sephiroth but even less cool, and one of them turns into Sephiroth and Cloud kills him. Then the planet itself cures the space AIDS, and it might have been because of Cloud's dead girlfriend. It's a Tetsuya Nomura story. What do you expect? The same day, the OVA, Last Order Final Fantasy VII, released. The OVA focuses on the Nibelheim incident flashbacks and Cloud and Zack on the run before Zack's death. Both scenarios have been recovered since then and altered in various ways to clean up some confusion, so Last Order isn't considered canonical today, but it's still worth mentioning. 10 days later, the episodic Before Crisis Final Fantasy VII began releasing on mobile devices in Japan and nowhere else.
Square Enix, because fuck you guys!
As the name suggests, the story is a prequel, beginning 6 years before FF7 and continuing until the end of 7. It focuses on the Turks, the evil corporation's secret agent guys, as they do battle with the eco-terrorist group Avalanche. Avalanche, you know, before Mr. T takes over Avalanche in the main game. 2006 brought a real game, Dirge of Cerberus Final Fantasy VII to the PS2, focused on FF7's optional party member, Vincent Valentine. In an odd departure, the game is a pre-Gears third-person shooter. It picks up 3 years after 7, and there's some weird shit about Hojo from 7 uploading his brain to the internet, and there's a previously unmentioned Spec Ops force working for the big bad company, and Gact shows up at the end. It's dumb. Mr. Clems did a really good review of the game, so check that out for more detail. The game also had a multiplayer component exclusive to the Japanese version,
because fuck you guys!
with its own story to expand on the villain group's backstory. There's also a mobile game, Dirge of Cerberus Lost Episode Final Fantasy VII, released later in the year and set in the middle of the main game. This thing really got out of hand, I think. In 2007, Square decided to release something that was a little more in line with the original game in terms of gameplay. Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII on the PSP. The story begins 7 years before FF7 and ends with one of Square's numerous recreations of the game's intro sequence. The game focuses on dead FF7 backstory character Zack Fair and expands on the backstories of Zack, Cloud, Sephiroth, and the latter's until now unmentioned best friend, Gact. I mean, he's not called Gact, but he's just Gact, come on. The game also serves as a Skyward Sword style origin story for Cloud and Zack's Buster Sword. The game is a far better prequel story than Square can usually manage, as I've covered in the past. Crisis Core was the final game in the compilation, as the only things that remained were related to Advent Children. For its 2009 Blu-ray release, Advent Children was expanded into Advent Children Complete. In addition to improved visuals and fixed graphical errors, the film was given an additional 25 minutes of footage to expand on character backstories and development, and of course, the final fight with Sephiroth. It's also added references to the rest of the compilation to make it more tightly packed. What, did the Resident Evil remake team plan this? Alongside Complete, a series of short stories were released called On the Way to a Smile that bridged the gap between the game and film. The first of these, Case of Denzel, was even adapted into animation by A1 Pictures for inclusion on the Blu-ray. There had been a previous novella released in the Final Fantasy VII Ultimania Omega book from 2005 that focused on Aerith from her death until the end of the game, but it tends to get left off official lists of FF7 media, so no one's really sure if it's canonical or not. December 2011 saw another novel, Final Fantasy VII Lateral Biography Turks the Kids Are Alright, released for the sole purpose of telling people who prefer simple titles to get stuffed. It's about a private detective shortly before Advent Children interacting with the main cast and the Turks and one of the film's villains, but nothing of note actually happens. At all. It doesn't need to exist, nor do half the words in its fucking title. After that, fortunately, the compilation is over, leaving Gact's weird resurrection epilogue in Dirge completely unresolved. But this isn't the end for FF7, of course not. The original game is getting a remake that is being developed in tandem with Kingdom Hearts 3, both directed by Nomura because that man will die for Square's sins. I've discussed how game remakes work with their series timelines before, but this one remains an anomaly. Because the original series is over, and because of how much this whole project's going to cost to make, the remake could either replace the original 7 in the timeline, or it could start an entirely new retelling of the entire compilation. We won't know either way until development really gets started after Kingdom Hearts 3 is out, by which time Nomura will have shaken off this mortal coil and entered the life stream. As such, some of these details might be changed in the long run, but as of right now, this is the timeline. And no, Final Fantasy VII characters appearing in the Tactics games, Guys, Mobius Final Fantasy, World of Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts or Dissidia do not count. Those are all confirmed to be different versions of the characters, so they're not part of the timeline. As such, some of these details might be changed in the long run, but as of right now, this is the timeline. The 10th anniversary Ultimania book gives a full timeline of the notable event, including actual dates, though some of these are left frustratingly imprecise, which should not happen in an officially published work. But the positive of this book is negated somewhat by the fact that the dating system is a complete mess. So at first, year numbers are preceded by this, which looks like a weird mathematical formula, until after 1999 it resets to 0, and this mathematical formula takes over in 001. And as far as I know, the book doesn't actually explain what the fuck any of this even means. So I'm going to ignore those random assortments of Greek symbols that are clearly just there to look cool, and focus purely on the numbers for the sake of our collective sanity. So without further ado, the Final Fantasy VII timeline, barring that stupid fucking symbol bollocks, goes a little something like this. Prehistory. The Cetra arrive on the planet Gaia to cultivate life. The alien entity Genova crash lands on Gaia and enacts a genocide against the Cetra. The Cetra seal Genova away in the North Crater. Over the next 2,000 years, the Cetra begin to crossbreed with humans, eventually becoming mostly extinct. 23rd of September 1959. The Shinra Corporation begins harvesting the Lifestream's energy into Mako. Circa 1977. Shinra's Professor Gast discovers Genova's hibernating form, believing it to be a Cetra. Gast and Professor Hojo begin experimenting on Genova to create human Cetra hybrids. Professor Hollander performs similar experiments. Circa 1980. Gast leaves Shinra. Hojo impregnates his lover, Lucrezia, and injects her womb with Genova's cells. The baby is eventually born with the name Sephiroth. Hollander's experiments produce Angeal and Genesis. Circa 1984. Vincent Valentine of the Turks confronts Hojo over his experiments on Lucrezia. He is captured and experimented on. Gast falls in love with a Cetra named Ifalna. Zack Fair is born in Gongaga village. 1985. 7th of February. Gast and Ifalna produce a daughter named Aerith. 27th of February. Gast is found and murdered by Hojo. 11th of August 1986. Cloud Strife is born in Nibelheim. Circa 1992. Sephiroth joins Shinra's Soldier Division and quickly rises through the ranks. Angeal and Genesis are inspired by Sephiroth to join Soldier as well. Year 0. Zack joins Soldier and is trained by Angeal. October. Genesis and Angeal defect from Soldier. December. Cloud is inspired by Sephiroth to join Soldier but fails to gain admittance. Year 1. February. The eco-terrorist group Avalanche begins a crusade against Shinra. 2nd of April. Zack is forced to kill Angeal and inherits his mentor's weapon, the Buster Sword. Year 2. 22nd of September. The Nibelheim Mako reactor is attacked by monsters. Sephiroth, Zack and Cloud are sent as part of a team to resolve the situation. 23rd of September. Sephiroth discovers both Genova and the experiments performed on him. He locks himself inside Shinra Manor to learn more. 1st of October. Sephiroth razes Nibelheim to the ground and attempts to release Genova. Cloud mortally wounds Sephiroth and throws him into the Lifestream. Sephiroth becomes sealed in the Great North Cave and begins plotting his return. Cloud and Zack are taken by Hojo for further Mako experiments. 18th of December, Year 6. Zack and Cloud escape Shinra Manor and go into hiding. Year 7, September. Zack defeats Genesis, who is then presumed dead. Zack and Cloud are later ambushed by Shinra forces, and Zack is killed. Cloud inherits the Buster Sword and heads for the city of Midgar. 5th of October. Avalanche's Fuhito summons and merges with Zirconade to destroy Shinra. The Turks destroy him, putting a stop to Avalanche's crusade. After losing his hometown to Shinra's forces, Barret's Wallace forms a new incarnation of Avalanche, which Cloud soon joins with his childhood friend Tifa. December. Sephiroth begins his plan to damage the planet with the Meteor spell to draw out the Lifestream and merge with it to become a god. Avalanche expands its membership to include Aerith, Vincent and several others and pursues Sephiroth. Aerith is killed by Sephiroth after performing the Holy Spell. Year 8, 14th of January. Hojo creates a digital copy of his mind before the party confronts and kills him. 21st of January. The party destroys Genova and Cloud finally kills Sephiroth with the Omnislash. The Lifestream and Holy successfully destroy the meteor and prevent the complete destruction of Midgar, but spread a fatal plague known as Geostigma. Shinra's deep ground organization is left trapped beneath the Shinra Tower. Spring. Cloud and Tifa take in an orphan named Denzel. Year 9. The remnants of Sephiroth are created by Sephiroth from within the Lifestream to bring about his physical resurrection. His plan is successful, but Cloud once again slays him and his remnants. Aerith uses the Lifestream's power to cure the Geostigma. Year 10. Hojo's digitized mind takes control of Vice of Deep Ground Sviets. He uses Deep Ground as part of his plan to awaken and merge with the Omega weapon. Vincent kills the Sviets and Hojo Vice and destroys Omega, finally restoring peace to Gaia. Unbeknownst to all, Genesis returns to protect Gaia in Sephiroth and Angeal's absence. 507. Midgar has fallen into ruin, but the party's Red 13 continues to watch over the planet. This one was tougher than I thought it'd be. I figured it's only a few installments and the order's already been laid out, so it'll be simple, right? Unfortunately, the sheer amount of, let's say, Japanese-style writing for the series makes the whole thing overly convoluted and long-winded, and, well, let's just say it's a good thing I'm not covering the rest of the franchise too, or I would definitely die. Honestly, Square and the fans just need to leave FF7 alone. Let it go and accept that, even if it doesn't continue, it'll always be with you in your heart. Wait, isn't that what the original game was about? Nothing personnel, kid.